A number of targets have been hit by coalition forces, including the Information Ministry as well as Republican Guard divisions on the city outskirts. It is not clear what has been hit in this latest airstrike. But we know earlier on Tuesday, that the presidential compound just there we heard a very loud explosion and the sounds of what could be a car alarm. Witness say earlier on Wednesday, a presidential compound used by Saddam Hussein's son Qusay was hit by at least 2 explosions, 2 bombs hitting that compound.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a short statement to make, and I will not be taking any questions.
Let's now go to Central Command in Doha,
forces have conducted a successful rescue mission of a U.S. Army prisoner of war held captive in Iraq. The soldier has been returned to a coalition-controlled area. More details will be released as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
What's your take on that?
Well, it could be, in fact, the so-called battle for Baghdad. According to Pentagon sources, U.S. ground troops are mounting a major ground offensive now against at least 2 Republican Guard divisions. This could be part of the push toward Baghdad. This is not one of those probing attacks where they've trying to soften up the divisions. This is an actual all-out assault against some of those troops in the south, and we should have an idea in the hours to come how successful that is and how much resistance they've met. But it appears tonight that there is what is the beginning of the major ground assault against some of those Republican Guard divisions that are blocking the way to Baghdad.
Outgunning them, leaving hundreds dead.
One American soldier from the 101st Airborne died on top of a tank. The battle lasted for several hours. Today, the road was still littered with signs of heavy fighting. Captain Brad Loudon says units from 270 Armor never trained for this kind of fighting back at their home base in Kansas.
These are desperate people doing desperate things in order to survive, and they're throwing everything they've got at us.
But it just wasn't the regular Iraqi army U.S. forces took on. Army commanders were surprised to find Saddam's elite Republican Guards, too, especially so far south of Baghdad, 65 miles from the capital.
There's 3 or 4 major approaches that lead into Baghdad. So he's going to protect those as far south as he can.
Captain Loudon says the Iraqi soldiers used cowardly tactics, boarding a bus in the middle of the battle and using women and children as human shields. American soldiers fired upon, fired back.
Soldiers had to do the unimaginable. It's the unthinkable.
The Army says no women were killed in the fighting, but several, including a pregnant mother, were wounded. Today, signs the Iraqi Army may try to counterattack. American tank units ready to stand their ground, blocking the road south from Baghdad. Dana Lewis, NBC News in south-central Iraq.
Republican Guard defending Baghdad has been battered down to below half its original strength. War correspondents have been told to expect dramatic developments in the next 48 hours.
This is the very beginning of the push. The goal is to overthrow the Iraqi regime and to free this country of its weapons of mass destruction and bring liberation to the Iraqi people. And this is the first major push toward Baghdad to reach that end.
The breakthrough that opened the route to Baghdad is glimpsed in these video phone pictures. Iraqi defences around Karbala, 70 miles southwest of Baghdad, gone up in smoke. The so-called Karbala Gap was the last potential bottleneck on the road to the capital from the west, where Iraqi forces might have choked the coalition advance. But overnight, the city was surrounded, and now it's all one-way traffic.
Now we're about probably about 7 clicks north of the Karbala Gap. We just went through the Karbala Gap, had a firefight, Sure past the EPW's there and some of the burning vehicles and stuff, heading towards our next attack position and get set for further combat operations.
Burning vehicles and EPWs, that's enemy prisoners of war. There'll be more of those during what's become a rapid advance to within 30 miles of Baghdad. The charge from the southwest has one more river to cross, the Euphrates. Then the outskirts of the capital will be just 25 miles away. Andrew Burrows, BBC News.
Virtually surrounded by British troops, as it has been for a few days. Thick black smoke, as usual, pouring over the city. The city is on the other side of that bridge that we're looking at. We think the smoke comes from possibly an oil well or from trenches filled with oil, which have been set on fire to try and frustrate the coalition bombing campaign in the area.
You can see people are able to come and go on that one route in and out of Basra, but it's still not secure enough for aid to go into the city on any sort of large scale, and that is what is desperately needed inside Basra. Still water supply shortages in the city. The water was cut off at the beginning of the campaign, but parts of it have now been restored. The Red Cross inside the city have managed to restore about 50% of supplies. Still not enough, though. And we've been hearing talk from some of those who have been managing to flee Basra of the use of human shields inside that city.
Welcome to Qasr, the port in southern Iraq, which was the scene of much fighting in the early stages of this skirmishing. You can probably hear the sound of children's voices behind me. If I get out of the way, the children who were extremely wary to start off with are now coming to one of these border crossing points to see what's happening, joking with the soldiers there guarding it and playing around, although I think there's a sort of minor problem of having to keep them at bay, but I suspect that would be children anywhere in the world, and the sort of sound of them mucking around trying to just push the boundaries of what they're allowed to do, with the soldiers obviously still very keen to do their work and still having to have a degree of suspicion about what goes on around them. But for the most part, Qasr is quiet.
Through the gap, apparently without sustaining any kind of damage or injuries, is that right?
That is true.
Yeah, go ahead.
No casualties and no battle damage.
What was the most dangerous thing about going through the gap?
Well, we had planned for him to use artillery because the gap was so narrow. Obviously, there's always a chance he could use a chemical weapon there to seal that gap off. He did not. He fired one artillery round, and then we returned fire with our counter battery, and I'm sure they destroyed that battery.
I saw an awful lot of MLRS, the multiple
yes.
launch rocket systems last night. What was the target?
Well, the target was enemy artillery. Our radars are up, and when he fired a round, we answered back with 12 MLRS rockets that would wipe out that threat.
How close to Karbala did we actually come?
Well, we within 500-600 meters of it. We passed right through the gap, over 2 bridges. So we did an assault crossing. We were the advanced guard, and we destroyed all opposition, both near and far side. And we also had an attack aviation company that was working in conjunction with me on my net. So we really shaped the battle well with artillery and aviation to sort of break his will up front. And then once we closed into close combat, there was he had no chance.
It sounds to me, Colonel, as though there are still a few howitzers going off there. Do you know what they're firing yet?
I think we have some movement target indicators. That I think that's the brigade and divisions working that issue. I don't really know exactly what's going on.
All right, so here we are out in the desert now for refueling. You'll be here for a couple of hours, and
correct.
And then you move on. What's the next mission?
Correct. Well, we're going to move north, I think. So I'm waiting for my orders.
You still don't have them? Or if you did, you wouldn't tell me. Is that
right.
the way it is?
That's
all right.
it.
Very close. Thanks very much, Colonel.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, one more thing. We did see that you picked up a number of enemy prisoners of war along
we did.
the way.
About 40.
Tell me about those.
Well, again, a mix of uniformed and non-uniformed soldiers and I guess combatants, and they're processing them right now.
The push for Baghdad is now on, a green light given for the final thrust by US forces towards the capital. Firing at Iraqi positions, these are US special forces punching their way forward. No exact details where or when, but it's believed to be western Iraq. After a night of bloody street-to-street fighting, US troops this morning emerged north of the city of Karbala. According to unconfirmed reports, 20,000 US soldiers have now crossed the Karbala Gap, an Iraqi ambush point. To the east, US forces say they've secured the final big bridge over the River Tigris, opening the way for the ground assault on Baghdad. In the skies, B-52s have continued their aerial assault on Republican Guard positions. US artillery are shelling dug-in Iraqi troops. The coalition claims 2 divisions of the Republican Guard are now reported to be at half their strength, calling for reinforcements.
Some of the Republican Guard units from up north have been brought down south to try and reinforce Republican Guard units in the south that have been badly weakened. That process goes on. They're being attacked from the air. They're being pressured from the ground, and in good time, they won't be there.
Military officials say the war's now entering a decisive phase. Iraq's defense minister, however, warned if coalition forces enter Baghdad, they'll pay a heavy price. In northern Iraq, near the Iranian border, US special forces claim to have discovered a terrorist training camp. Inside, documents describe how to make sarin gas, cyanide and ricin. It's believed to have been occupied by members of Ansar al-Islam, a group the US says has links to al-Qaeda. Bombs have again struck central Baghdad, targeting Saddam Hussein's son's headquarters and Republican Guard barracks. In the suburbs of Basra, Royal Marines were again involved in fierce firefights seeking out Iraqi resistance. British troops surround the city. From the inside, civilians are complaining of increasingly brutal measures used by Iraqi militiamen to stop them fleeing. British military officials say they'll take their time liberating the city. Colin Campbell, 5 News.
Marines bombed the Ba'ath Party headquarters and the base of the Fedayeen paramilitary in the centre of Nasiriyah. A team of Navy SEALs and Army Rangers were dropped by helicopter at about midnight into the Saddam hospital in the south of the city. There they found the 19-year-old soldier with 2 broken legs and a broken arm, but otherwise stable and in good condition. The plan had been kept secret from all but a handful of top military officials and the Delta Force. Lynch's rescue was announced 3 hours later at command headquarters in Qatar.
Coalition forces have conducted a successful rescue mission of a U.S. Army prisoner of war held captive in Iraq. The soldier has been returned to a coalition-controlled area. More details will be released as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
US troops had found a bloodied American uniform belonging to a female soldier when they seized another hospital in the city. They had learnt she'd been shot in the leg. An intelligence tip had then helped them locate her. It's not yet known if Private Lynch's injuries were sustained when a section of the convoy of the 507th Ordnance Maintenance Company she was with was ambushed 10 days ago after taking a wrong turn. The bodies of at least 2 other American soldiers were also recovered in the rescue. As yet, it hasn't been announced if any of the 5 American prisoners captured in the same ambush shown on Iraqi television last week were amongst them. Private Lynch's debriefing could well shed some light on their fate.
In addition to bringing out Private First Class Lynch, we also were able to recover 11 bodies. We don't know yet who these bodies are or even if they're Americans. But forensics is working it right now to identify who they are.
Towards the west, and on the far western edge of town, you could see this tremendous firefight going on. It started at midnight, pretty much on the dot. There was tremendous fire poured from the south bank into the north bank, then tanks and light armored vehicles streamed across the bridge down there, which hadn't been in American hands, but they captured it for this operation. Previously they hadn't needed it and had sort of left it under Iraqi control. There were also airstrikes coming in. You could hear the planes roaring overhead, and then a few minutes later one of the precision-guided bombs, a few seconds later I should say, one of the precision-guided bombs would explode in the town with a huge flash. So that was going on for, what, 45 minutes to an hour. It became clear this morning exactly what it was they were doing, that they had these were all diversions under the cover of this enormous firefight. Elite Delta Force troops were themselves going across the bridge into the town, which the Americans hadn't controlled up until now, and extracting Private Lynch.
Orders on the latest progress on the battlefield. With their families.
The coalition conducted simultaneous attacks
over the last 24 hours against regime targets in Baghdad and against regime forces throughout the country. I have two products to show you from recent precision attacks against regime targets. The first one is a regime command and control facility at the south end of the international airport near Baghdad. This is a closer view of it where the arrow points down at the bottom. In the attack, in this case, there were 26 different aim points for this single target set. Each aim point had a different weapon applied against it. The aftershot, in this case, you can see was effective. I would point out that there is a mosque in this complex. You can see it in the lower right corner of the screen, the rounded dome, and it is in good shape as it was before the attack. And the split, please. The second is a Ba'ath Party headquarters in Basra. This one was attacked on the 25th of March, but again, it is an example of our precision in attacking. Two different aim points in this case. Aftershot. And the split. You can see the greatest amount of damage was done right here to this building. We remain very concerned by regime actions taken against the Iraqi population in places with cultural or religious significance. The following video sequence is going to show you a heavy equipment transporter. This is a large flatbed truck that is capable of carrying tanks and other very large pieces of equipment, moving into a populated area south of Baghdad. I'll point out a few things on here first. This is the heavy equipment transporter off to the right. There's a tank on its back, and inside of this retaining wall is a mosque. We can go ahead and roll the video. There's usually one tank on each one of the heavy equipment transporters. A second truck shows up as well, and the tank is clearly seen on the back of it. You can see now these two. There is a third heavy equipment transporter that's further up to the right, and in the next clip you'll see that it carries a container on its back, and that container explodes. The coalition had no jets, missiles, bombs, or anything else in the area at that time when this explosion occurred. I would say that we do look for heavy equipment transports, especially with armored vehicles on them, as indications of repositioning. And this, in this case, was an aerial surveillance platform that took the image and happened to record it. Another example of disregard for the conditions of Iraq and the Iraqi people is the burning of oil trenches. A few days ago, I showed you a color photograph of one of the first trenches which had been prepared as part of the defensive array of Baghdad. It was set on fire, and we saw that several days ago. The next image will show you what the current condition is. There are over 50 oil trenches on fire around Baghdad currently. 50 oil trenches. Let me just highlight a few points. This is again in downtown Baghdad, the center of the river as it passes through. Saddam City, a primarily Shia area. On the northeast side, the Saddam Canal, where we've already mentioned there are bridges that are rigged for demolition. Most of the fires began here, but as you can see, each one of these is a different burn point. These are deliberately created trenches. Coalition action had nothing to do with the start of these fires. Our coalition special operations forces maintained pressure on the Iraqi military forces in northern Iraq through precision airstrikes directed against the regular Army 5th Corps. Our searches in the Ansar al-Islam training camp continued with coalition and Kurdish Peshmerga working closely together. Our efforts to deny freedom of action and freedom of movement in the Western Desert also remain very effective.
I have a short video to show you of Coalition Special Operations Forces indicating how mobile they are and their ability to move throughout the Western Desert, actively searching for regime forces, ballistic missiles, or air defense systems. This, as with all other operations, is done completely blacked out. Multiple aircraft in this mission. You'll see a landing and then again taking off and going on an additional patrol. These types of operations are occurring every night throughout the Western Desert. And as we encounter regime forces, missile systems, other points of interest, compounds that need to be raided, we're able to do everything we need to do to get the job done. Our Coalition Special Operations Forces also seized the Haditha Dam, a very important dam that could potentially flood the Euphrates River leading down toward Baghdad, and particularly in the area of Karbala. That has been seized as of 2 days ago, and we prevented its destruction. There have been significant regime losses in the vicinity of the dam. We also remain very effective in targeting regime concentrations with the aid of local populations. That improves with every day that goes by. Our land component initiated a 2-corps attack to destroy Republican Guard forces defending the outskirts of Baghdad. The 1st Marine Expeditionary Force attacked the Baghdad Division near the town of Al-Qut, over here, and has crossed the Tigris River. The Baghdad Division has been destroyed. 5th Corps attacked against a combination of the Medina Division and the Nebuchadnezzar Division, both of the Republican Guard Forces Command. Their attacks are effective, and action continues, in this case, near Karbala, along the Euphrates River. 5th Corps units also attacked to clear paramilitary forces in Ain Najaf. The attacking unit was welcomed by thousands of citizens. It was also welcomed by fire from regime forces who had positioned themselves inside the Ali Mosque, one of the most important religious shrines to all of Shia Islam throughout the world. Coalition forces were disciplined, discriminated, and chose not to return fire against this mosque to keep it protected. The regime's use of the Ali Mosque for military purposes to trigger a coalition response is just the latest detestable example of the regime's strategy of deliberately putting sacred sites in danger. UK forces continue securing the Al-Faw Peninsula and the Rumaila oil fields while destroying any remaining resistance in the south. Among their recent successes are the capturing of 5 cruise missiles of the Styx variety near Az-Zubair Airport. These missiles are designed for the OSA patrol boats that we sunk in the first days of the war. They can be fired into Kuwaiti territory or against ships that are out inside of the North Arabian Gulf. At this point, UK forces remain firmly in control of the northern approach to Basra. In one particular encounter, UK forces captured a motorcycle courier, and this is a classic example of developing the situation on the battlefield and creating military advantage. The motorcycle and crew had maps in their possession that showed artillery positions. The UK forces went to find the artillery positions, found them, destroyed all the artillery, and also found 3 Ababil 100 missiles and destroyed them as well. The maritime component handed over the port operations of Qasr to the land component today. and a UK military port management unit will take over the running of the port from the military side. Each day, we see the effectiveness and the importance of pushing information to the Iraqi people. And this is done even at the tactical level. I've talked about some of the things we do at the operational level in our radio broadcasts, our TV broadcasts, and our leaflet